Teşekkür. Salam, merhaba. Hürmetli hanımlar ve cenablar. And now I continue in English. Dear colleagues, dear students, Kruzi-Türken, German literature dealing with the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. First of all, I have to explain the expression Kruzi-Türken, which in fact was a southern German swear word in the early modern period. The etymology of this word has nothing to do with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ or the Christian cross. The word Kruzi-Türken stems from the combination of Kurds people with the Turks. In early modern times, the Kurds in Hungary, as well as the Turks, were very dangerous for the Habsburg Empire. Therefore, it is no wonder that the Turks became an important topic throughout German literature from the Middle Ages till the 18th century. The rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire was depicted in many German texts, which often used political realism, but also show a strong fascination with the Turks in instances of so-called Orientalism. Today, I would like to present some examples of German literature dealing with the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. Methodically, I rely on the so-called literarische Interessenbildung established by Joachim Heinzle in Germany. The first and decisive clash of the Holy Roman Empire with the Ottoman Empire was clearly marked by the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396. And on the picture, you see the Battle of Nicopolis. In 1396, the Christian army led by King Sigismund was severely defeated by Bayezid I. After the battle, many Christian prisoners of war were executed by the Turks. Only some young men were deported as prisoners and later brought back to the Ottoman Empire as servants and soldiers. One of these captured Christians was named Hans of Schildberg, and there is his story. Hans of Schildberg, this young knight from Munich, you know Munich, Bayern Munich, yes? From Munich in Bavaria, followed King Sigismund in his fight against the Turks and later became a servant of Bayezid after the defeat at Nicopolis. In his own words, and you can read it over there. No, it's the wrong. Back. Go back, please. Yeah, thank you. You may read it. In his book, Schildberger reports his adventures and references many interesting geographical sites. We learn about the Turks and the Tatars, about the Black and Caspian Sea, even about Siberia, and of course about Islam and Islamic culture. No, it's better you make it. Schildberger's report was printed several times in the early modern period in Augsburg, Frankfurt, and Vienna. Especially Augsburg became important for books dealing with the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. Now the next picture, please. The most important event that led to a rapid boost in printed books was the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. I think you all watched the famous film Fetih. Yes, I watched it too. I watched it in the Turkish original and underlined in German. Yes. Yes. Conquest of Constantinople, 1453. Very important. A few years later, in 1461, Pope Pius II, the former Enea Silvio Piccolomini, wrote his famous Epistola ad Mahometem, letter to Mehmed II. In this letter, the Pope tried to convince Mehmed II, Mehmed the Conqueror, to convert to Christianity. The Pope explained the advantages of such a conversion. If Mehmed was baptized, he could become the Christian emperor of Constantinople. We do not know whether Mehmed ever replied. Fact is that he did not become a Christian, of course. Yet we do know that this letter of Pope Pius II was printed and spread all over Europe via several translations in vernacular languages. The German translation was made by Michael Christan. In it we read, it's over there, from the Vienna manuscript, Translat, aufgeopfert und zugeschrieben dem hochgebären Herren Graf Eberharten von Württemberg, and so on. In his text, Michael Christan informs us that he wanted to have his translation printed in Augsburg, which, as you already know, was an established center for printed books on the Turk. Until now, there is no edition of Michael Christan's German translation. Therefore, I am preparing a critical edition which will be published next year by Walter de Gruyter, Berlin, New York. Okay, next picture, please. In Ingolstadt, Freiburg, Augsburg, and Nuremberg, several plays existed that dealt with the Turks in Latin and in early New High German. Usually, the Turkish threat was brought on stage in Latin plays. The most famous play now and in the 15th century, when it was written, is the early New High German Türkenfastnachtspiel, meaning Turkish carnival play. Turkish carnival play. On stage, the Turkish Emperor Mehmed II himself travels to Nuremberg. The citizens of his town promise to protect him against the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and the Christian Knights. In return, Mehmed II promises to guarantee religious freedom for all Christians in Nuremberg. Moreover, he wants to protect the Nuremberg citizens against all hostile knights, evil priests, and the Jews. Furthermore, Mehmed promises to reduce all taxes. This is followed by quite a funny and carnivalesque debate and quarrels on stage between Mehmed, his Turkish advisors and followers on one side, and by the Christian knights on the other side. Obviously, this debate is won by the Muslims on stage. Of course, this is a carnival play, a political satire against German knights and dukes who caused so many problems for the free imperial cities like Nuremberg or Augsburg. At the beginning of this play, we hear the announcement that Mehmed II will come into town like a messiah or political deliverer. Just some short citations, quotations. Nun schweigt und hört Fremde mehr, der große Türk ist kommen her, der Griechenland gewonnen hat, der ist hier mit seinem weisen Rat. Next picture. In this play, the Turkish carnival play, we have the promise of religious freedom on stage. The promise that all Christians can keep their Christian belief reflects the multiculturalism that existed in the Ottoman Empire. Multiculturalism in the Ottoman Empire. As you know, the Turks did not force the Christians or Jews in the Ottoman Empire to renounce their religion. Christians and Jews were indeed not forced to become Muslims. It is quite interesting that this political fact is cited at the beginning of this carnival play, which was written only 1 year after the Fetih of 1453, 1 year after Constantinople or Istanbul had been conquered. Moreover, this carnival play shows that citizens of free imperial cities like Nuremberg, Augsburg, or Frankfurt were not really afraid of the Turks in the 15th century. What they really feared were German knights and dukes who, not unlike robbers, were a permanent threat to merchants in the Holy Roman Empire. In addition, the citizens of the free imperial cities feared the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire would impose new taxes because of the fight against the Turks. In reality, everyone in Nuremberg or Frankfurt knew that these taxes were not used for the warfare against the Ottoman Empire, but for the personal interests of the Habsburg dynasty in Vienna. Therefore, the cited carnival play about the Turks became a great success among the urban audiences of the 15th century. We also learn that no hate existed between the inhabitants of the Ottoman and the Holy Roman Empire in the 15th century. Citizens in free imperial towns were afraid of tax increases, not of the Turks. So always money is the case. Yeah? World doesn't change. Our next example, this one, from 15th century Augsburg, shows Saint George fighting on stage against a dangerous dragon. You all know maybe Saint George fighting against the dragon. Yes, very famous picture in Western Europe. Such plays are quite popular in Germany even nowadays. In this Augsburg play, a town inhabited by heathens is threatened by a dragon. The dragon promises not to destroy the town if the king of the town sacrifices humans for him every day, which the dragon then kills and eats. One day the princess, the king's daughter, is chosen as the dragon's victim. Thank God, Saint George arrives to protect the princess against the evil dragon. At the beginning of the play, he asks the princess about her religious beliefs, and the princess answers, and that's the scene above, Jungfrau zu St. Georg. So the princess is telling, Ritter, ich will dir sagen schier, wir haben starke Götter vier, den hochgelobten Mahmet, der wohl Gewalt über den Wurm hätt. Apollo und Herr Vigand sind die andern zween genannt, der Gott Jupiter künstenreich, wellend all nit sicherlich, dem unreinen Wurm gesiegen an. I will paraphrase this, of course. The princess tells Saint George about the gods she worships. The four gods are called Mahmet, Apollo, Termagant, and Jupiter. Whereas Apollo and Jupiter can clearly be identified as ancient Greek or Roman gods, Mahmet or Mehmet is the Turkish version of Mohammed, the prophet of Islam. Like in many Christian medieval sources, Mohammed is said to be a god and not a prophet. But what is most important is the anachronistic combination of Jupiter and Mahmet. In the play, the heathens of the legendary source of the play are identified with the Turks. And after Saint George has killed the dragon, all the heathens who formerly worshipped Jupiter and Mahmet are baptized and become Christians, meaning that on stage, not in reality, on stage, Saint George is fighting for the conversion of the Turks. The play was performed in the presence of the Brotherhood of Saint George that had been established by King Frederick III and King Maximilian I for the sake of the fight against the Ottoman Empire. Many members of that brotherhood lived in Augsburg. In this town, merchant dynasties like the Fugger family relied on the ship routes from Venice to the Middle East. Next picture, please. Yes. The merchants were afraid of the Ottoman fleet that threatened Augsburg merchants and their ships. To end this threat, a maritime alliance was established in order to combine the fleets of Venice, Geneva, and Spain in the fight against the Turkish fleet. In 1579, the so-called Holy Alliance defeated the Turkish fleet near Lepanto. Due to this unique victory, a Turkish monstrance was made of gold and silver in Augsburg. As you can see, the Turkish monstrance shows the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. The fight of the two fleets is depicted in many details, but the Christian victory of Lepanto did not last for long. The next picture. Here's another detail from this monstrance showing the Battle of Lepanto. You see the great ship with the cannons, and you even see some Turks fighting. It's about half a meter high. And next picture. The Christian victory of Lepanto did not last for long. In the 16th and 17th century, the Ottoman Empire, as you know, expanded continuously. Let's have a look at another picture. It shows Simpert Nickel, a priest of the Abbey of Neresheim in southern Germany. He is wearing Turkish clothes, although he's a Christian priest. He's wearing Turkish clothes, but not because of a carnivalesque costume or for fun. This priest was part of an imperial delegation to Istanbul. The picture is taken from the printed report of Simpert Nickel about his travel to Istanbul. Nickel's report was printed at Augsburg. In it, we read about gifts that were sent from Augsburg and Vienna to Istanbul. Every year, the Habsburg Emperor sent gold and silver to Istanbul to prevent the Ottoman Empire from invading Austria. As you know, Turkish troops threatened Vienna twice, first in 1529 and again in 1683. Next picture, please. Yes. In 1683, the Bavarian Duke Max Emanuel, on the picture, Max Emanuel, called the Blue Duke because of his uniform, helped to defeat the Turks near Vienna. Duke Max Emanuel was fascinated by Ottoman culture. Many buildings erected in Munich under the reign of Duke Max Emanuel imitated Ottoman architecture. And you can see this Ottoman architecture in Munich even today. But this Duke did not only import Ottoman architecture to Munich and Bavaria, he also brought Turkish and Muslim prisoners of war to Bavaria. Next picture, please. And these prisoners of war had to work as servants, cooks, or hunters, and many of them later were baptized and got married to Christian wives. Some of the former Muslims even became generals or mayors. The records of their funerals and tombstones today remind us of their fate. Here you see two tombstones, and buried inside are Turkish prisoners of war who lived and died later in Hanover in the northern parts of Germany, and the inscription is in Turkish and in German language. Nowadays, there are many historians in Germany trying to get information about the fate of those Turkish prisoners of war, and we are trying to commemorate their life. Next picture. Since the days of Max Emanuel, the threat of the Ottoman Empire weakened. In contrast, the fascination with the culture of the Ottoman Empire increased all over the Holy Roman Empire. A kind of Orientalism could be seen on stage in operas by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and others. The increasing interest for Islamic literature can be seen in Johann Wolfgang Goethes Westöstlicher Divan. Less known nowadays is the translation of the Holy Quran into German verses by Friedrich Rückert. Now you see a German Quran. And you see the Surah number 112 down, and it reads: Im Namen Gottes des allmächtigen Erbarmers. Sprich, Gott ist einer, ein ewig reiner, hat nicht gezeugt und ihn gezeugt hat keiner, und nicht ihm gleich ist einer. Friedrich Rückert is trying in his translation to get the poetic impression of the Arab original to transform it into German verses. Yeah? It's a very famous Quran translation in Germany. In the 19th century, Friedrich Rückert, the author of this translation, was quite a famous German writer. His books and the books of the best-selling author Karl May testify the great fascination with the Ottoman and Islamic culture at the end of the 19th century. Next picture. Thank you. At that time, Emperor William II, German emperor, and Abdul Hamid II became allies and close friends. This German-Turkish friendship led to building railways in the Ottoman Empire. Quite famous today is the German fountain in Istanbul, you see over there, which was created as a monument for the friendship of William II and Abdul Hamid II. This old German-Turkish friendship explains the fact that since the 60s of the last century, many Turks came to Germany as workers. They have been staying in Germany ever since. 4 million nowadays. 4 million, and Germany has got 80 million inhabitants. These immigrants from Turkey got married and had children, most of whom are German citizens today, having German passports, voting in German elections. Of course, we find authors and poets among these former immigrants from Turkey. Quite famous is the novelist and dramatist Feridun Zaimoglu. But we also have very young authors like Serkan Erol, one of my students, whose dramas are shown, for instance, at the Augsburg Theater. In his plays, Serkan Erol reflects the fate of his generation to bridge the gap between traditional German and traditional Turkish culture. He and many other German authors with Turkish ancestors show clearly that German-Turkish multiculturalism has become important for our present German literature. Thank you.